Tehuti Ma'at, that means I'm offering you truth. I am Asnefaka, aka Nef. I want to welcome you to Taboos. And today's episode, I'm really excited about because I have been waiting for the opportunity to touch on all of the different things that have been coming to light. And because it tends to be a heavier topic, and we've touched on a couple of these deeper topics before when it comes to sexual abuse, deep rooted traumas, and all that good stuff. And the intention of Taboos, which stands for taking accountability by owning our shit, is for us to have those conversations that would normally be considered taboo, that usually are kept in the shadows, and bring them to light. So the whole theme of this episode is darkness coming to light. Okay. And as you can see by the title, why we're not done with Diddy and why we can't be. Because if we just try to rush ourselves through this situation and just completely write it off as a distraction, as some people are, or completely like micro zero in and focus on it and miss the divinity in the details, we would miss out on this collective opportunity that we have for healing. So the intention of our series is to bring these conversations to light and talk about topics that we usually don't talk about. But for myself, as a sacred wisdom keeper of ancient African sacred science, and aka Kemetic science, it's my intention with this series to always impart and to share ancestral wisdom and different principles and mythologies and different ways that we could practically use our ancient wisdom to navigate these difficult conversations, situations, and circumstances that we find ourselves in this very pivotal moment for humanity on our planet where everything is being healed. So, if you are new here, welcome. Tehuti Ma'at is a grassroots cooperative. I am the mother of Tehuti Ma'at. We function as a resource mechanism for people of African ascent, primarily to bring upliftment, empowerment through our programs and community services. If you want more information about the work that we do, you can visit tehutimaat.org. I will give some things at the end, just some housekeeping things about some upcoming events and things that we have going on. So I'll save that for the end. What we're going to be talking about today is we're going to really have a holistic approach to the topic of what is going on in the mainstream around Diddy, around the sex trafficking allegations, and all of the things that have surfaced with the lawsuit that came across to the public recently with Cassie and several others bringing up lawsuits. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty details. A lot of other people are covering that. And that's not anything unique that I can bring to that conversation. What I am going to speak to this topic from is from a spiritual overstanding so that it can support whatever understanding that we have already and bring us to center, right? So that way we can approach the topic from a neutral place. And if you haven't watched any of the previous episodes that we've done, I do highly recommend that you watch the previous episodes because the foundation that was laid in those first 10 episodes is really important for us to be able to have and go deeper into the conversation that we're having today. So because there's so many layers and tiers to it, it might have to be extended into next Tuesday's episode. So we'll see. I do also want to apologize to those who were here yesterday for the live stream because so many things have happened. As you can see, like I'm traveling. It was things beyond my control that I couldn't, find myself to create the stable space that I had intended to be able to do the live stream. So even today, I'm just doing what I can with what I have. And I appreciate those who are consistently here. So I want to welcome those who are here with us live. If you are here with us live, please tune in via the chat Shout out to Brother Omawali, who I saw was here earlier in the house. I appreciate everybody who has been consistently watching our streams and supporting the channel. So thank you. And as I said today, we're going to go into multiple layers. I like to take the approach of what is called the pyramid analysis, which was created by Dr. Leonard Jeffries. Okay, the pyramid analysis is an African-centered approach to critical thinking and analysis. So we have to look at it from the 3 points of the pyramid, or Merkut, right? So that is the political, the economic, and the cultural aspect. So that's the approach that we're going to take to this topic today. We're going to make sure that we look at how this whole dynamic is unfolding spiritually, right? I'm going to be sharing different principles that are going to support us in navigating that, because it is a difficult conversation for us to navigate, because a lot of us have emotions tied to it. A lot of people have been triggered by the video of Cassie and Diddy that leaked, supposedly, that was put out, whatever. That's now, you can't unsee it, right? So it's triggered a lot. There's different perspectives. There's a lot of unconscious emotions that a lot of people are not processing as well. So I just want to bring those things to light, not what we already see and what's already on the surface. Okay, so we're going to go deeper, do a deep dive. So the spiritual side is the cultural aspect. So again, we're going to look at it specifically from the context of people of African descent, of Black people, because we're dealing with a very unique wound that we're healing. In the previous episodes, I've talked about why our sexual wounding, our trauma, and the healing of our humanity because of the Ma'afa and our ancestors being enslaved is so important, and directly connected to the ways that we're expressing sexual deviant tendencies and behaviors, whether that be incest or other forms of abuse, even the domestic violence, right? So all of that is what we're going to begin to unpack today. So before I go any deeper, shout out to Sister Simone, who's always in the house. It's always great to see you, sis. Make sure if you are here with us live, if you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the chat, and I'll make sure to uplift your comments and answer any questions that you put into the chat. Okay. So first and foremost, I want to talk about how we're looking at this conversation usually from the context of just a reaction, right? And of course, you can't watch something like that and not see and feel, the pain of, well, for some people, we can be desensitized. And I think that that's a big conversation that we need to have. Why are so many people desensitized to domestic violence? Why are so many people not able to really connect with? And why, as a culture right now, currently, as a collective, right? Obviously, not all of us, but as a collective, why is it that so many of us can just outright dismiss someone who's in a position or who has become a victim in a particular situation? It's just, there's a lot for us to unpack there. Okay. So I want to go ahead, and I did want to make sure that we cover first and foremost how we're currently in a survival culture, right? Because we have to put that into context first and foremost. This is not our original nature, our original culture. When we talk about Black culture today, we are usually talking about mainstream culture, right? And a lot of that comes from our survival, which is a beautiful legacy. And I first and foremost want to uplift and honor all of the beloved, honorable warrior ancestors who literally shed their blood from the process, from the very beginning of colonialism, all the way to now, the people who are actively resisting, fighting the political prisoners. We have had so much resistance, and our survival is worthy of celebration. Our healing, however, is contingent. It's contingent upon us going beyond the survival, right? So we need to go beyond just surviving now at this point, because we've done that. We're here. And to honor the sacrifices that those who came before us made for us to be able to be here and have the luxury of having the privileges that we do have, we have to honor and respect the whole paradigm and continuum that we're a part of, right? So that means even before the Ma'afa, before any of our ancestors were enslaved, and I mean before European enslavement, before Arab enslavement, before that, if we go back to our legacy as the original people of the planet, right? The first cultivators of the planet, and to develop and create civilization, right? To be now at this point where we're embracing literal barbarism, the opposite of civilized behavior, as part of our culture, we're in critical condition. So at the same time that we honor the legacy of our survival and the resistance and resilience of our people, of our spirit, our collective spirit, we also have to honor and acknowledge that we're at a low point, right? This is not an expression of our greatness. The expression of our greatness is the fact that we're able to even be here, right? We're still alive. And life is our legacy. And if you focus on mainstream culture and the way that it wants to present Black culture, we would think that death is our legacy, not life. So it's important for us to look at that, because I want to recommend 2 books as I'm beginning right now. One of them is Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop, who's a Senegalese anthropologist, wrote a book called Civilization or Barbarism. Very, very, very important book. And it makes the distinction between what Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop presented and brought us that's so important for our healing, intellectually, psychologically, psycho-spiritually, is the 2 cradle theory, right? The fact that humanity developed in 2 different ways. So usually when people are processing things from a Western, like Eurocentric psychological perspective, like Sigmund Freud, and human nature is analyzed from that standpoint, it's expressing, or what that Eurocentric worldview is sharing is a perspective of one aspect of humanity's development. The other aspect of humanity's development was in Africa, right? And we talk about he talks about the development of civilization and humanity developing out of the tropics, right? And the other side is out of the cold, right? The Northern European climate, right? So very, very important book. I may reference it at some point in our conversation. The other book that I want to recommend is Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome by Dr. Joy DeGruy Leary. Really important, because for some reason a lot of people feel like we can't deal with the reality of post-traumatic slave syndrome as a reality, because we feel like we're victimizing ourselves. And I think it's very important to recognize that just because we acknowledge what has happened does not make us a victim of that, right? And I think that because we constantly just want to move forward and move beyond or overlook it is a testament of not being victimized by it, of truly surviving and being resilient. However, we do got to look at what happened to us and what happened to our culture, because this isn't the bulk of our experience, as Africans have been traversing the planet for millions of years. So we're talking about a sliver, a tiny fraction and portion of our development that we're in right now, if we look at the last 500 years, right? What Dr. John Hendrik Clark, Baba John Hendrik Clark would say, it would be one half the wink of an eye if we compare this moment, this experience of exploitation and enslavement compared to the entire legacy of original peoples. Okay? So still we have to look at that, because there's a lot of trauma and a lot of wounding that comes from that place. And that psychological enslavement, right, that mental enslavement is one of the things that we have to deal with. And a lot of that has been perpetuated by the entertainment industry. So when we look at someone like a Diddy, we're looking at the face, the head of that. Even when you looked at the fact that Revolt was one of the companies led by Diddy that was speaking for and giving a platform for the culture. And that's literally what he was branding himself around in this last leg of his reign, if you want to call it that. So there was a lot around Black media and him being a Black leader and him controlling, or his apparatus controlling the narratives of the Black community, right? Or Black people. And I think that that's really important for us to look at, because now we get to see, and what's coming to light is the exposure of the character and the energy that has been driving that forward, right? So when we talk about darkness coming to light, it's important to look at how, again, in previous episodes, we talked about Ma'at. I always got to bring in Ma'at because we're looking at balancing the scales. Ma'at are the scales of truth, right? And for the truth to exist, the two polar aspects of anything, right? The two opposing or complementary aspects that exist in all things in this realm, right? That positive and negative charge have to come together to create that electricity. They have to be balanced. So what that does is allows us to neutralize our perspective on anything. Because again, Ma'at being truth is a symbol of justice. That's why to this day, you go to any courthouse and you see those scales, okay? Because justice is about balance and equilibrium. That's the ultimate judgment, is being able to synthesize the two sides. So when we look at a situation of domestic abuse, but also everything else that has been alleged, right? But obviously, because he put out the apology specifically about the video of him abusing Cassie coming out, that's what's already been confirmed by the video and by his statement. Everything else is still there, still under the surface. So let's bring that to light, because it's a whole chain of energy that's tied to this. And when we look at someone in that position, someone like Diddy is somebody who's able to influence the culture to that degree, who has been given that much power, which the power we give, right, through our validation, through our attention. Even though time and time again, we've seen the character of this person, right? There's a reason why everyone says it was always, well known in the industry that this is what was going on. So it's important for us to recognize that there's so much more beneath the surface. And even within that, we have to see why all of this even exists to begin with. Because we are always dealing with things from a spiritual perspective. So as much as we can judge the situation, right, as being abusive and harmful, toxic, whatever words we want to use, it's still unfolding, right? And it's important that we reserve our judgments for ourselves. We can always say what's right for us. And that's the essence of Ma'at. It's a moral inventory that we do on ourselves. So I'm saying that to say, yes, despite the ugliness of the situation, we still can look at it from a human perspective and connect more deeply. A lot of people don't feel like people who are perpetrators of violence and evil should not be humanized or empathized with. And very well, we do need to look at the person who's actually harmed in the situation, because so many people are abused and go through trauma. Anyone to become a perpetrator of any type of violence or abuse is usually a victim of that abuse as well. So we do have to look at this idea of the victim, right? And what happens when you stay a victim is you create the trauma again. However, if you heal or repair to an extent, even if you repress it and not recycle it, that to me is an expression of survival, right? Of going beyond the trauma. So it's important to look at why always in order to get more data, right? To balance the scales. So a lot of times when we move through, what I noticed when working with people who, or even having conversations with family and friends, when we look at a traumatic situation or behavior, we look at, okay, how do we get through this? Or how do we move on? Right? How do we override this? How do we move forward? And sometimes the why wants to be overlooked, because the why is where the painfulness is. The why is where those unsavory, unpleasant emotions are. The why is where the shame is. The why is where the guilt is. The why is where the hurt is, right? So if we don't ask ourselves why something happened and we just want to move past it and move into how, right? Because we could look at the situation and think about what really brings justice to a situation like this. When even that fraudulent expression of accountability, right? That was called an apology. You can sense the insincerity, but can we judge it? Many of us have. And again, we have our intuition, we have all the different faculties that we have to pass our own judgments for ourselves. Anyone could look at the situation and watch the video and say, okay, he didn't even really directly apologize to her. Up until now, he was lying. So obviously we can see that it's an expression of like being sorry for getting caught, not being sorry for doing what you did and probably continue to do, or would continue to do if the opportunities presented. So a big part of the how is accountability. There has to be, you have to pay for what you've done. That's why Ma'at is Ma'at. There's the karmic aspect of Ma'at, right? Like you get what you got. You get what you gave. what goes around comes around. So you have to pay, you have to reap what you sow. So there's that aspect of it. And the why to me is important to look at what happened there with him. You know, he really needs healing. Like that's clear. But when I say he needs healing, I feel like because it's so interesting that he's put himself in that position, or he was actually in the position to influence the culture to that degree, which speaks to what he's expressing about our culture, that we would have him there as a representation. Because I'm pretty sure damn near everybody knows someone who either was abused or someone who abused someone. And that is something that's been normalized in our culture, in the mainstream and in society. And I'm not, and not even just for our people, but like really it's something that we nurture. That's why I'm reminding us with the Taboo series that we can't let things stay in the shadows. We have to allow them to come to light. Because when they stay in the shadows, it becomes problematic because we don't deal with it. And that's where the shame and all the other things develop, because it's a shameful thing. How can somebody who is beating their wife or their husband, right? Because I'm not going to, it can happen on the other side. How is that person who's the perpetrator, if they really want to heal, able to actually express that healing if they're so ashamed of admitting what they did? And they can't even be nurtured in that case to even figure out why they're doing it, because they're so ashamed to ever let it come to light. So when something is exposed and it's not that person's choice, it's like you force them to deal with that and to face that shame. And like the public is now shaming him, right? So he has to deal with everything that was repressed and that he could repress because of his position of power, which is really what any expression of abuse is about, or especially when it's sexual abuse. It's a power dynamic. I heard this quote. It was like, everything in the world is about sex except sex. Sex is about power. And it's interesting to think about that because he had so much power that he was able to create so like an extension of abuse through that power. So all that power that was given to him was used to create more trauma from whatever wounds that were festering within him, right? So I want to come back in because one, I want to just shift the energy real quick. I want to shout out to Brother Rob, who's in the house. Welcome. And Sister Ma'at, welcome, sis. Glad to have you. I want to put into the chat the invitation so that you could join the stream. I did invite Sister Ma'at, but everyone is always invited to join the live stream. So I just put the link in the chat. So if you want to actually come on, you could just follow the link and it'll bring you in. And you can actually join and come on the stream and be part of the conversation. Okay. Otherwise, feel free to also just put your comments or questions in the chat and you can engage that way too. But if you actually want to come on and be on camera and speak to the audience, I would really appreciate that as well. So just follow the link and you can come in. So again, going back to the why, like why do abusers abuse? Why do people do evil? And earlier I was talking about Civilization or Barbarism, the book by Dr. Sheikh Diop, because when he made that distinction between the development of what we consider the European and the African, and showing that these are two different modes of development for humanity, and it creates two different natures, the nature of the warmth and the nature of the cold. I wanted to say opposing because it's not really about it being opposing forces, but they are opposite. And it is important to recognize the necessity for both, right? In African spirituality, or African science, I should say. I want to make sure to make that clear. We look at the two polarities as necessary forces. So there's many different ways, aside from Ma'at as being a cosmic principle of truth, of justice, of cosmic order, right? It's a universal principle, right? It's a cosmic principle. There were also terrestrial or like grounded principles or mythologies that were expressed, one of which is the mythology of Ast and Asar, or Ast, Asar, and Heru. This is the original Trinity. So I like to bring that up because when we're looking at those two opposites in African science, if we look at it in that context, you have the story of Set and Asar, the two brothers. Set and Asar are both masculine energy. So in our tradition, we always look at everything in couples. So Set's wife, Nebetet, is the feminine aspect of the principle, and Asar's wife, Ast, or Aset, is the feminine attribute of that principle. So Ast and Asar represent life and regeneration, and Set and Nebetet represent death and decay. So these are principles. It was symbolized and characterized and personified through the couples. All of the different principles always were in couples. So you had the masculine and the feminine side of the energy, because there was always an active and a receptive side of the energy. One pushes and one pulls, right? So Ast and Asar, again, represent life and regeneration. Set and Nebetet represent death and decay. And they were both seen as forces that were necessary. It was one family, right? You can't have one without the other. So in the mythology, you have Set, who's jealous of his brother Asar, who's the king who reigns over the fertile land. Set is given the desert land. He's jealous. He kills his brother. And I'm making a quick summary. I'm going to put it in a Kari shell. And essentially, what happens is, I wanted to see if I could take that banner down. So Set kills his brother, chops his body into 14 pieces. Those 14 pieces are scattered. Ast and Nebetet mourn the death of Asar. They look for the pieces of his body, find 13 of the pieces, put them back together, bandage him, the original mummy, right? And every time that process was done again, it was an ode or an honoring this mythology of Asar, right? The principle of rebirth, right? The resurrection principle, because the 14th piece of his body had to be fashioned. Ast had to make it because they couldn't find it. It was literally his erection. And she makes it, some say out of stone or wood or clay. And she does the ritual over his body, and he resurrects, impregnates her, and she gives birth to their child, Heru, right? Heru then, when he is raised and is old enough, goes to battle his uncle Set to take back the throne that is rightfully his, right? Because when Set kills Asar, he takes over rulership. All of this is symbolic. Okay, I've touched on this in previous episodes, but repetition is the mother of learning. All of that symbolism is to describe a dynamic that's constantly happening energetically. And that's what this represents. When we look at the exposure of people who have been exploiting people, abusing people, who have been in these positions of power, perpetuating trauma and evil on the planet at the highest levels, that is an expression of this gravity Set, right? Set is the gravity. It's what pulls us down. It's the ego. It's the mundane, physical materialism, all of those things. And it's not that it's inherently evil. It's necessary. We need gravity to function. But it's not meant to be the authority, right? So you need death in order for life to exist, right? We're in a finite expression. Otherwise, we would just perpetually be living. There would be no purpose. So those opposing energies give purpose, and they allow us to strengthen ourselves literally by going against gravity. When we push against gravity, we create muscle. It's how we create strength, literally. So I express that to say, when we're looking at this dynamic of this evil and why it exists, it is important for us to look at the polarity of two cultures. And one culture in particular is not about color or race. It's not about the construct of race at all, or even heritage. At this point, it's the expression of the energy, because people of African ascent and all across the African continent right now, you have a Eurocentric cultural takeover. You know, the people, for the most part, not everywhere, but in terms of what is actually being influenced, you have the technological movement right now that's trying to colonize or recolonize Africa under the guise of technological development. You have the European influence that's still there. You have the American influence, and you have the Chinese and Russian influence. Those are expressions of Asiatic, European cultural influence, not the original pre-colonial African cosmic worldview. So what I'm talking about is taking us back to the original. And in order for us to do that, we have to look at the nature of the development, because the culture that's currently there now is a culture based on survival, right? Because the culture of the cold, the culture of the European, had to survive in the cold. So the primary elements of the culture are based on that need for survival. For example, patriarchy. In the environment of the cold, having children, procreating, was considered a threat because it's another mouth to feed, right? And that woman can give birth to another life. Not only that, she's a burden because she's not strong enough to go out and hunt. You also have to hunt and kill in order to eat. Now, juxtapose that with the opposite in the tropics, in the heat, in the warmth, and abundance. The part of humanity that developed in that space didn't develop a culture of survival. It developed a culture of abundance because the food was abundant. You didn't have to now kill to eat. You could just pick fruit from a tree. It was falling all over the ground. It was abundant. It was everywhere. A woman giving birth was seen as a gift, more hands to help on the farm, right? Like, it was seen in a completely different way. So that is really important, because in Africa, for the most part, you had matrilineal and matriarchal and matrifocal systems that uplifted the mother principle and uplifted the woman. But right now on the planet, the dominant world order or disorder, the social paradigm is patriarchal, right? So when we look at something like this situation with Diddy, I can't help but look at how people looked at the situation in the very beginning. Oh, she's just trying to get it back. She's, they're trying to castrate him, and all of that was projected onto the situation was also a reflection of that cultural paradigm, right? Where the woman is devalued. Even though abuse can happen on both sides, it doesn't change that that subconscious programming and that acceptance, and for many people, it's not unconscious. That's not our original nature. So the fact that now we're in a situation where we're actually perpetuating violence against women and literally have a culture that's promoting violence against people in general, anyone, that's an expression of barbarism, not an expression of civilization. So to me, when I look at the situation, it's hard for me to just look at it in this isolated, as just like a situation, a circumstance that's unfolding. I'm looking at it as a reflection of the collective space that we're in and the opportunity that we have to heal and what we do need to heal, because it also triggers people who have been abusers, who have been predators, and who have that power right now. And particularly when it comes to something like a patriarchal system where you have a male dominated system that's extracting power and must give up that power in order to balance the energy. It's easier to not have power and judge what you would do with power or what other people with power do versus having that power and having to think about giving it away. Power is not inherently evil or bad. I don't agree with that quote, power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. I think that that's created a situation where now people are afraid of power. And what we have to come to terms with is the fact that we have to carry our own power and stop giving our power away. It's different when force is used to take power, right? There's the first chapter of The Blueprint for Black Power by Nana Amos Wilson is such a great and important chapter to read. And he talks about the different aspects of power, different types of power. And when force is used to take power, that's a masculine thing, right? Because it's active, it asserts itself. You also have coercive power, where it's more manipulative and subtle. It's not direct and blatant and blunt, where the power is stripped and taken. Nonetheless, when you have a power dynamic like that, where the power is exploited and taken, right? Because it's serious allegations that are being investigated. When we're talking about sex trafficking and creating like a blackmail ring and all of the different things that were in that lawsuit, that's people don't get in a position where they have so much power out of nowhere. That power has to be taken from somewhere else. It's like looking at the president or prime minister or like leaders in different regimes. They have all the power that they have because the people are sanctioning it. The people are giving their power to them as representatives of the people. They don't just have the power, but again, it's the convincing the people that they have the power so that people don't see that the power is actually coming from them, validating that person and allowing that person to be in that position, which is why revolution is so important. And I mean like the actual expression of revolution, not creative revolution or theoretical revolution. I mean the actual overthrow of the government is something that's important. The creation of the divided states of America is based off of what? Revolution. The people have the power. And when the people have to take back the power, that is what revolution is. So these people who are in these positions where they have all this power, someone like a Diddy, where was that power coming from? Massive exploitation, manipulation, so much corruption there to be in that position. Not everybody who's in that position or in a position of has to express it or take it that way. However, looking at the world that we're in right now, because it is inverted, and you have to think about the fact we're in a degenerate cycle. So all the things that are put on a pedestal at this point in the cycle are the things that are inversions of what the healthy expression is, right? So it's like, I think a great example of this is like everything that was coming out about Dubai with the porta potties and the women going there and literally getting violated and giving up their dignity, getting defecated on for money and these bags, and like the level of like prostitution and like how rampant the sex work is and all this underbelly of Dubai, right? That was coming out. And for some people, they still don't know about that. It did start coming out, but they do a really great job. They do a really great job of preserving the image. Why? Because it's very much like Hollywood. It's this glitz and glam, right? The glitter and the gold and the Ferraris and the and the beautiful hotels and all of that, right? That's the image, the facade, right? So that's the cycle that we're in right now, is allowing the darkness to come to light, or birthing the light from within the darkness, because that's what's actually happening. Darkness is not inherently evil or bad or wrong. It just is. Going back to Ma'at, we have to look at things neutrally. If we can look at things neutrally, we can see the opportunity of what is actually there and not allowing just the emotions to dictate it. The emotions allow us to connect. But when we distance ourselves a bit from the emotions and it's not so personal, we can actually process and have more wisdom from a situation. So same thing with light. Light is not inherently good or positive or right. Light has its negative side, its evil side, right? Light is what creates illusion. We're in an illusion of light when the sun is shining, because the whole cosmos, the whole space is dark. We're all in darkness. Darkness and chaos is the predominant expression of the universe, right? So light illuminates, but it can also, in excess, create illusion and can be used for manipulation as well. Something can be too light and some things can be too heavy, but the darkness is not inherently bad or evil. I think that's important to know. And the light is not inherently good or positive. So when we're able to look at things that way, we can see, okay, it's a difficult thing to process, but from a spiritual perspective, it's important to note that evil exists for a reason. Okay. I hate that that bubble thing keeps popping up. It's like every time I guess it sees me with my thumb up, somebody's got to explain that to me. I really need to know what that is, because it'd be making me so uncomfortable when an unsolicited bubble just pops up like that. But it's difficult to look at the necessity of evil. But everything in the universe has to be processed. And if we can't have one without the other, we can't have light without darkness. We can't have day without night, right? We cannot have up without down. We cannot have life without the two polarities. How can we see the necessity when we go through cycles? Because I mentioned us being in a degenerate cycle. If we start at a golden age and the top of the cycle of the spiral is the best possible expression, and it has to cycle down and go down to its worst expression, the complete opposite, a dark age, and then come and spiral back around to go up. That's what I'm saying is constantly happening, is we're moving through cycles of time. So in order for things to come back up, they have to go through that period of darkness, which means all of that evil has to be filtered out. So people whose soul expression has come and been incarnated to experience the things that they're experiencing, that are evil. And, for myself, even I talked in previous episodes about being molested as a child, about watching my grandfather murdered when I was 4 years old. It's like all of those things can be perceived and judged as bad, evil, negative things. However, all things have a purpose. But until we go through the process of healing, we can't really see that. And the healing itself is the purpose. All of us who are here on the planet at this point in time is facilitating and a part of literally everything being connected and us being one organism. We're all facilitating a healing process that's happening on this planet. All of our souls are here serving a particular function in that. So as difficult as it may be for us to see that, right, to see the forest through the trees, it still is the reality. So when I look at the situation again, I do see it as an opportunity for us to look at the space that we need to heal, especially when it comes to how much we are allowing these types of behaviors to be, this type of behavior to be regular, right? To the point where we say we're normalizing it. The fact that so many of us are desensitized to the violence, desensitized to the corruption and all of these different things that are unfolding. But particularly with this situation, we can't just move past it. We can't just be done with him, because there's a lot here that we have to deal with. I think it would be way better for our collective if we allow the situations with Diddy to fully come forward. We can't just allow it to be dismissed through the religious paradigm, because I did notice that in one of the lawsuits that was filed against him, um, the brother was basically alleging that when he was working with him, and this is one of those like fine details in the lawsuit, he expressed that when they would work out every day, that Diddy would watch TD Jakes. And he noticed, like at first he thought it was a positive thing. He said, oh, he watches a sermon when he works out. But then he realized that he was studying him. We don't see how religion is weaponized. And that's something that's very important for us to see, because not only are we still mentally enslaved, collectively speaking, the spiritual enslavement is really big. When I talked about the cultural paradigm earlier, about the civilization and barbarism of the two sides of development of human culture, that expression of misogyny and patriarchy that is inherent in the European culture, that is imposed on all of us, it's expressed in all of the three major Western religions, right? That's the basis of Western civilization, is Greco-Roman culture. So to me, it's important that we look at how spiritual enslavement is a barrier to true healing and true order, right? To Ma'at, to justice, to the truth. Because the dogma itself, particularly with Christianity, when it comes to forgiveness, forgiveness is a very powerful and beautiful thing, especially right now. All the science is coming out about neuroplasticity and how important it is for the body to forgive, and how powerful it is for the body to, for the, not only the body, for the mind in particular, I'm speaking on, but spiritually, emotionally, forgiveness is very powerful. However, accountability is also very, very important. And in the dogma of Christianity, when the belief is that Jesus died for your sins, and thus you don't have to be accountable to it if you just give it up because it was put on the cross, Those are belief systems that we have to recognize affect our morality. And I always speak on this because when you look at Ma'at as an ancient moral system, an ethical code, there were 42 principles of Ma'at, 42 covenants that were said. In Judaism, in Christianity, it said that Moses received the 10 Commandments after Moses was raised in the temples in Kemet, right? And in that mythology, Moses is given 10 commandments. When you look at those 10 commandments and you look at the 42 covenants of Ma'at, it's very important to recognize, one, that they reduced what Moses would have had to have seen growing up as a prince of Kemet, because Ma'at is the code. It's etched in every temple, right? So the other difference is Ma'at being a moral inventory you do on yourself, right? In the beginning of the day, we would say, I will not steal. I will not kill. I will not waste water. And then at the end of the day, we're taking that account. Remember, we're saying, I have not stolen. I have not killed. I have not wasted water. And when we get to what we have done, we check that. We have to seruj ma'at. We have to restore balance, because our heart is not light as a feather. When that heart is placed on the scale with that feather, that ostrich feather of truth, the heart can be heavy, and you have to heal that. That's the moral code of our original nature. The 10 Commandments are an external force dictating and commanding what is right and what is wrong. Not that you have the accountability and the authority to do that for yourself. Because remember, everything is in a couple. So Ma'at, being the feminine principle, was balanced by universal law, or Tehuti, the masculine principle, which represents the record, the scribe. That is the accountability. So we have to be accountable for the contents of our heart, the integrity that we live by, right? And it was about synthesizing the mind, Tehuti, and the heart, Ma'at. So it's important for us to look at that, because if we begin to normalize a culture that is not ours, that we had to adopt in order to survive, we're here, we're alive. Moving forward and rising out of that requires for us to live so that we can thrive, and to restore ourselves, to resurrect our collective spirit. And that's what the story of Asar represents. Those 13 pieces of Asar's body representing the 13 pieces that the European parasites carved Africa into during the Berlin Conference in order to colonize the continent. That phallic principle, that erection representing the diaspora, right? The sperm comes from the erection, right? The children of Africa that are spread all over the planet. This is prophecy. Our unification and our resurrection is a prophecy. And in eternity, we've already won, but we do have to move into that space. So the moment we're in right now is an opportunity for healing. So if we look at the situation with Diddy, it is important to have deeper conversation. It cannot be dismissed. Yes, it may be distracting from certain things that are happening right now as well. Like I did notice on the same exact day that they came out with, well, not came out with, because it's been a fact. It's been a reality that the virus in 2020 that spread was, trying to be aware of my words here so that things don't get censored and removed. But nonetheless, it was created in the lab in Wuhan, right? gain of function research that was being done, all the work that was put out there by, I think, what's his name? Robert Kennedy, who put out the book, Who is Anthony Fauci? Very, very important information. A lot of things that don't end up reaching our people, I noticed. Like a lot of that information was not really coming to Black people. And that's something that I found very interesting, because when I look at other communities, they have like, the preparedness community and a couple of other things. And all of these spaces, like, and I'm not talking about like conspiracy theories, I'm talking about like spaces for truth, spaces for sovereignty, people coming together, building. And I find that the majority of us are so distracted because of the entertainment industry that is weaponized to pacify and to corrupt our spirits. Diddy is a key component and player in that. So while many of us may just want to be done with him and want him to just go down, what it represents for us is an opportunity to illuminate the most corrupt and ugly sides of our culture that we have to heal and face. Because it doesn't just end by eliminating the perpetrator. Because remember, that perpetrator is also a victim. The healing process happens by actually processing what has happened and learning from it, repairing it. So I think that that's a really important thing that we have to look at when it comes to any type of sexual abuse. I think the emotional healing and the process of emotional healing is something that's important that I want to share in the next episode, because I didn't really get to, I'm gonna be honest, I'm like a little bit scatter-minded because of the shift in the process that I'm currently in right now. But again, like I told you guys, I always want to show up anyway and speak and allow my voice and the insights that I can share and the wisdom that I can impart from our ancestral system, our ancestral science, to support people. But I also think that it's important to just think of another way to narrate what is happening from an empowered place and from a spiritual perspective, from the higher ground, and taking that bird's eye view. So I do want to be able to talk a little bit more about our need to center victims and not just disregard victims. Because if we're talking about healing anything, then we have to look at what's hurt and who's hurt and recognize that everyone's hurt. And it doesn't have to be a victim versus perpetrator situation, but recognizing that it's all pain. And as easy as it is to judge that pain because of how it looks or how it expresses itself, it's pain nonetheless. And if we really want to change the situation, we want to stop recycling this type of trauma, we're going to have to heal the victim and the perpetrator and see the perpetrator's pain as well. It's hard to see that with someone like Diddy because none of that has come out yet, but everything all will begin to surface, and he does still have to be accountable for his choices. We all do. But that doesn't mean that we can't give ourselves grace as we're moving through things and give others grace as well. Because we're really not the judge, right? We're the judge of ourselves. In the court of Ma'at, you are the one. The faculties of yourself are the ones doing the judging. So, yeah, He has to live with himself every day. However, as a society, we have to shift what we have tolerated and what we have nurtured, this rot that we've nurtured, so that we can change what the standard is. And we can do that through collective accountability and making people have to answer for what they've done. People have to stop protecting people who are in these positions. And I'm thankful for all of the people who have the courage to speak out, because it's not easy to speak out, especially when you're speaking out against someone who has power over many people. And the way that that manipulation happens to begin with, to put you in a position to be exploited and abused, is already a power dynamic that is difficult to navigate when you're the one who is on the receiving end. So, a lot of us, it's an interesting thing, because when it comes to the victim thing, a lot of us, we want to be victims, because we don't want to take the responsibility of healing, healing our power. I don't mean healing the pain, but if we sit in the hurt, we stay a victim. If we move through it and beyond it, we become survivors, right? And we can even become people who are in the position to support other people, to illuminate the path for healing for other people, to give other people the courage to speak out about their circumstances and situations, to create methods and ways that other people can move through the things that we've moved through, learn the lessons that we've learned, teach and share. So all of that is a beautiful thing that comes from the healing process. So there's always more to heal, and we keep moving through that space because we're here during this time that's here for healing. There's a lot to be healed, not only on a personal level, but I've talked in previous episodes about the multiple dimensions of healing that we have to do. There's generational healing, there's ancestral healing, there's past life healing. So there's plenty of healing to go around. So we do have to give ourselves grace. We do have to allow ourselves to just be and move through the process, and allow other people to move through their process as well. So that being said, I don't want to go any deeper into it right now, but there are other aspects of the conversation that I didn't get to speak on today. We'll see how things unfold for next Tuesday's session. I do want to ask anyone who's here before closing, if anyone has any final comments or questions, you can go ahead and put them into the chat. Oh, shout out to Danny. I just saw you sent your message joining us a couple minutes ago. Shout outs to Danny. And yeah, if no one has any other comments or questions, then we'll probably just wrap up today's stream. I want to shout out everyone who's here with us live, and also those who come and join us later on and watch the replay, or the raw play as we like to say. I want to go ahead and invite those of you who are interested in learning more about ancient African sacred science to join the Tehuti Ma'at Militia. We are a membership program, or the militia is a membership program to join Tehuti Ma'at. Our militia focuses on service and developing revolutionary institutions, cooperative institutions in the areas of healing, art, and education. So our community service projects are things you can look up. You can follow us on Tehuti Ma'at on Instagram. So I'll also put that on there. The links are also in the description. If you did enjoy today's stream, I do want to invite you to also support the stream with a donation to Tehuti Ma'at. The Cash App is $ Tehuti Ma'at World. So I put that at the bottom as well if you're interested in that. And finally, if you want to reach out to us, if you have any comments, questions, need any additional information, please email us at grow@tehutima'at.org. And you can also, let me go ahead and put this here. So I put it at the bottom, grow@tehutima'at.org. And you can also text us at 646-883-MAAT. So I said I would do some final housekeeping things by letting people know what's coming up right now in real time. This strong end, Saturday and Sunday, we have programming going on at Tehuti Ma'at Community Garden in Brooklyn. On Saturday, there is the Tehuti Ma'at Community Garden members meeting. If you're interested in becoming a member of the garden, or if you want to volunteer at the garden, you want more information about supporting organic food for the people, our urban farm initiative focused on bringing affordable organic produce, as well as education around nutrition, agriculture, urban agriculture particularly, and health and wellness and healing, then you can come to Tehuti Ma'at Community Garden. And if you want to be part of our program on Sunday, we're having our Raw workshop, which is part of the Raw workshops are the educational series that are part of the Organic Food for the People initiative. And the installment that we're doing on Sunday is Community in the Hood. It is a community building workshop where we're literally going to be building things together. We're going to be building a 3-bin composting system. We're also going to be creating some tables and raised beds. So during that project, you're going to be hands-on. We're actually going to be doing the construction projects, and we're also going to be learning about community building skills. So you're welcome to join us Sunday at 3 o'clock, Saturday at noon. More information if you want it by following us on Instagram, because you can go ahead and look at the links on there. You can also check out our link tree that has all the links to different aspects of the instrument of Tehuti Ma'at. And again, the Instagram, if you want to check it out, is Tehuti Ma'at. So I hope to see some of you at Tehuti Ma'at Community Garden. If you have any questions, as I said, you can always reach out to us. And we want to thank you again for joining today's live stream, and hope that you enjoyed the conversation today, and hope to see you next Tuesday. All right, power.